Hello and welcome. This is Jim Kaufman with Rankin Technical College. In this video, I'm going to go through the Chapter 12 Labs Part 1, and I'm going to also show you the associated demo applications I have that's somewhat related to the lab assignment. So over here, the first one is about doing a flashcard. So you're going to be creating a new class called flashcard. Right? And just to kind of quick review here, if it starts with a dash over here on the variables, a dash means private, a plus sign means public, all right? So you just can follow this, and then here it shows you that you've got a constructor. Whenever you see the same name, right, in a UML diagram as the name up here, right, the class name, and you see a method name the same, you know that's a constructor. And that's how you basically set the variables, right? Based on the term and definition by using the constructor here. And then you've got two different methods to get the term and get the definition. Okay, I'm not going to go through each one of these within this document, but just kind of wanted to. So one thing I will show you is, so like in this case for flashcards, you put in a term, right? And then you click define. If it finds it, it's going to go ahead and print out the definition. If it can't find it, it's going to make some other stuff visible, right? So you can add a new term, all right? And I'll show you how to do that. So you're going to set it to invisible. You're going to set it to visible equals false. And then in your code, you can flip that to visible equals true. All right. And then in my demo app, I'm going to be doing a recipe book. So it's going to be kind of similar where you're going to search for a recipe. If you can't find the recipe, you'll be able to add a new recipe. The next one is a store inventory. A little bit more on this one. You have a lot more, right? A lot more fields. Did want to mention, make sure that, like it says up here at the top, all labs must utilize classes and object as defined by the UML diagram for each lab to receive any credit, right? So you can't just skip creating a class. You need to create each one of these classes. All right. So store inventory is going to be similar to the contact manager that I'm going to create. A little bit more of a sophisticated form here. And then you've got the bank login. So, you know, some of these labs here in this assignment are the ones that you've kind of already did. So you can go Wayland Bank. Remember, you already did this where you log in, you log out, you do deposit withdrawal. You can go ahead and grab that code and copy that in there. Your basically your win form, you know, your form GUI, and you know your also your C# code for that. And then you can just go ahead and you know, make some changes from there, right? So in this case, you're going to go ahead and create an account class, right? And set everything on this account class and just use that instead, right? But you'll already kind of have your GUI for the most part, right? And then game break. So this was a similar also. So you probably could do the same thing here as well. You're searching for different game names, right? So you can grab all that code, and then you're just going to be adding a new game class, all right? Then you got a job estimate. And I kind of forgot to. So for yours on your number 3 was what? The bank thing. I have a library card system. For 4, my demo is going to be a movie database, and yours is a game break. Let's see, for 5, you got a job estimate. I've got a shipping calculator. And then the 6th one is a tile estimate, and mine's a paint estimator. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and go through these demos. Yeah, and actually, I did want to mention, you know what would be a good thing for your flashcards, for your different terms, you've got all these terms up here, terms to review, right? So you can actually go look these up, right? If you don't know any, if you know them, you know, that's great. If you already know the definition by heart, but if you don't, you know, you can go ahead and look these up, okay? Look them up. Maybe you want to look them up from a perspective of C sharp. You know, a lot of these still are very similar, you know, even if it's a different programming languages, you know, concepts such as encapsulation and composition and aggregation, these are all concepts that, you know, kind of are across multiple programming languages, right? Some things are a little different, how you create methods, you know, kind of standards and so forth for C sharp, but a lot of it is, you know, still is similar across multiple programming languages. But just an idea here for your flashcards, you can kind of use these, right? That'd be a good idea. All right, so let's go ahead and look at some of these demos. All right, so here is that recipe book, the first demo. I just want to show you a few things here. So obviously these are things that are on this, are visible, right? But these are basically going to be invisible. And let's just run this real quick just so you can see this. So as you can see, all the stuff down here doesn't show, okay? Because it's the visibility is set to false for these, okay? So let me show you that in the GUI, where to set that. So if I click on this, come over to my properties, scroll down, it's actually right before data, right before the data section, you see the visible, right? So visible's false. So you can set that to false for anything if you don't want it to be display. So each one of these, if you go down right before data, there's a visible and it's false. So all of these are set to false, right? And obviously these are the ones that are visible, you know, common sense here, but, you know, obviously are set to, I went too far here, right before data, visible, it's true. So, right, these are set to true. All of these are set to false, right? And then in our code, we are setting that to true, right? If it's a situation where it doesn't find the recipe, then it'll set it to true. So that you can add a new recipe, ingredients, instructions, and click the add button. All right, just real quick though, I just wanted to kind of go through something. And so, you know, I have this recipe.cs. So just kind of review here, because, you know I went through this in kind of like the chapter 12 lecture a little bit, but, you know, you're going to have to add your new classes, right? So to add a new class, you can just come right up here and right click. Oh, you can't select it like that. So I got a little carried away with all my clicking there. Right click and click add, and then come down here to class, down here at the bottom, right? And this will be highlighted. And then you just add the name of your class here. So for the lab 1 assignment, right, that you're going to have the first one, you're going to have flashcard, right? Just like that. And hit add. Okay, and so as long, and so you can add as many classes as you want, right? For mine, it was recipe. For yours is flashcard, right? Then you're going to go ahead and go from there. You're going to go ahead and, you know, add your instance variables, right? Add your instance variables. Here's the class right here. Add your instance variables and your methods and everything else, right? And just to, you know, just kind of review this, because, you know, I talked about this, like I said, in the Lab 12 video, lecture video. As long as it's in the same namespace, as long as your namespaces are the same. So if you copied it from somewhere or something and you have a different namespace, when you get into your code, right, when you get into your form, right? In my case, my form is right recipe for a book form. So when I get into this one, right, and I try to access my recipe class, if it's not in the same namespace, it's going to be a problem, right? So you know, there's ways around that, but for our purposes, we don't need to kind of work around that, right? As long as it's in the same namespace, you have access to this recipe.cs file, right? So that has to match the same thing that you have in here, which is this right here. Okay. All right. So for now, I am going to real quick here. Let me get in here. So here, actually, this says public. By default, it's going to create it as internal. So basically, you know, just so it doesn't cause any confusion. Basically, internal means it's available within this program itself, right? Within your app. If it is internal, it's all within here. You'll have access to it, right? Same with public, right? Public's just internal is a little more restrictive, right? It's got to be within your project, right? If you have it public, it can be accessed outside of your project, right? But we want to kind of keep it internal, right? For our purposes. All right. So flashcard, same thing here. You're going to just, you know, enter all your variables, right? And your variables and your methods, etc. All right, but I'm just going to delete this for now, just because we're not really going to use it for this. All right. So, all right, I showed you the visibility stuff already, all right? So that could be helpful for you there. So here is our recipe class, right? So we have private instance variables, right? Kind of the standard, so to speak, of your instance variables is that they're underscore, right? And so if you recall also, private is because like in the UML diagram, it starts with a dash, right? If it has a dash, that's going to be private. If it has a plus sign, it's going to be public, right? So in our UML diagram for this one, it had a minus for all your instance variables, right? These are private instance variables, right? You can't just access them without accessing them through this class using your public getters and setters, right? And here's a recipe. Here's your recipe constructor, right? So basically, this is how you set all your variables, right? You're going to pass in a name, ingredients, right? And then you're going to set those on your different private instance variables. Okay, and these are all read-only properties. Now, there's different ways to do this, and I think your lab assignments are a little bit different than this, and I'm okay with it as long as you name things correctly and do that. But this is kind of the more traditional ways, not using get before the name, okay, or get ingredients or get instructions. But you know, either way, you should try to follow the UML diagram. That's kind of the key, right? Follow the UML diagram. So this is basically a get, and this will return underscore name. This will return ingredients, right? And then there's instructions as well. All publics. So this has no setter methods, right? So there's only one way to set these variables, and that's by using this constructor, right? So this is great as long as you never need to edit anything. You're not going to be able to edit. When you follow this, follow it, you know, this kind of a structure, right? Using the code in this way, you know, there is no editing, right? There's no editing it. You're only going to create it one time. Once it's there, you can get it, and that's it, right? Okay. And then obviously this is using a display. And then if you recall, this is for new line spaces, right? This will create a new line so that you have some spacing in between recipe, ingredients, etc., right? So this is doing 2 new lines, right? And it's using plus signs, which is just basic concatenation, right? Concatenating one line to another, one string line to another. Pretty straightforward there, all right? Let's go ahead and go to our form now. Okay, so let me go back real quick to our where is, all right, it's right here, I think. I might have closed it. All right. So here it says the program can store up to 15 recipes. The program comes preloaded with 3 sample recipes. Users can search for a recipe by name, right? Case insensitive, right? So that means you want to turn it to, you want to kind of convert no matter what a user would put in a field, you want to either convert it to uppercase or lowercase, one of the two, right? Lowercase is kind of usually more commonly used, right? You know, to convert it to lowercase and then compare them, right? So if a recipe is found, display the ingredients, instructions, right? Um, Using the display method. And if the recipe is not found, prompt the user to add by entering ingredients and instructions. And then the display method returns a formatted string with all recipe details. Okay. So yeah, let me, one more thing here. So just also is worth mentioning, besides you just, classes are about really all about kind of data holders, right? They're holding on, you're creating a new instance of a class and they're holding on to specific data. And so if you create multiple recipe objects, each one of them will have and contain its own data, right? So it's possible it could contain exact data if you did it that way. But for the most part, in most cases, your data is going to be different. In this case, each recipe is going to have its own set of different data, right? Now, this is a display method that is part of this class, right? But this isn't really about, setting or getting the data or holding the data. This is about just displaying what data is already available, right? So, other methods, what I'm kind of trying to say here is other methods can be part of your class besides just the getter and setter methods, right? You can have other methods as well. Okay, so in our recipe book, we're getting a list of recipes. Um, um, so here is this is, the basic public, this is a constructor in itself, right? This is your constructor that we've always used within our form, right? This is our form one, right? So it always has an initialized component, and you always want to make sure you do that first. By default, it's always there, right? But you can also add other things as well. In this case, right, we can add, we can load our sample recipes, right? We call a method that loads our sample recipes, right? And our recipes will be held, right, at, these are private, this is a private instance variable, right, called recipes. That is an array of recipes, right? Right? This is our object. It's an object array, right? And we're setting this to 15, right? And then also we have a recipe count. So we can count how many recipes we do have. And then once we reach a point, then we won't add anymore, right? But here's our sample recipes, right? So on initializing of this form, as soon as you click the button to start it, it's basically, it's internal initializing all of the components that basically are on the Windows form. Then it's going to go ahead and load the sample recipes, right? And here you're using a constructor, right? So you're inserting, this is your name, right? The second one, these are all strings, right? The second one is, let me move this over a little farther. I can get rid of this toolbox, I don't need that. The second one is your ingredients, right? And the third one is the directions, right? So these are the three instance variables. One's the name, two's the ingredients, and three's the instructions, right? So we're creating 3 different recipes, okay, all with different data. And just kind of I don't want to say review, but just kind of mention that in memory, it's very important to kind of understand a little bit about the computer memory and how that's handled. So each one of these recipes will be stored in a little bit. We store the same area of memory, but they will be all distinct. They'll have their own distinct references, right? Each one will reference a certain place in memory, right? Each recipe will have its own little area, right? Okay. And then what we're doing here is after we created these 3, we set our recipe count to 3 because we got 1, 2, 3, right? All right. And then obviously the recipe count is up there at the top. So as long as it's going to be resident in memory, it stays in memory just like we've done our other things, right? So now this will be 3, even if you're adding multiple things, right? It will survive past button clicks, right? So the button thing is for searching. So if you go ahead and put in a term, okay, we're using this is null or white space. This is a method that's on the string class. Okay, you don't have to use this. Okay, there's no requirement, but just an option for you. And this is basically saying as long as it's null or white spaces, right, you're good to go. Otherwise, please enter a recipe name. If you didn't enter anything or you just put some spaces in there, it's going to say, nope, that's not good enough. Please enter a recipe name. All right. And then your search term, it's going to go ahead and it's going to trim it. It's going to get your search term. So just to kind of mention this as well, you remember a lot of times we do numbers, we have to do try parsing and all that. But for strings, it doesn't really matter what you entered in the field for the most part. There's always some edge conditions, but if you entered a number, you're not trying to do anything with it. It's just going to pretty much going to just treat everything as a string, right? So no reason to do try parsing or anything like that, right? It's just a text string. Okay, so you're going to get your search name, all right? This is always good to do, is to trim off leading and trailing spaces, right? Any kind of a space before your name or after your name, right? This does not up here. This here will not clean spacing, right? Only trim will do that, right? So here you're just trimming it. So you're getting rid of leading and trailing spaces, and then you're going to search for the recipe, right? So here's find recipe, a different method. Let's go to that. Go to definition, and basically tries to find the recipe by name. Case insensitive, that's because it's using the 2 lower, right, on each thing, right? So your recipes, and at this point in time, you've got 3 of them out there, right? So what you're doing is looping through your recipe count, which we set our recipe count to 3, right? So we're looping around it, trying to find where the name of the recipe matches the name of the recipe matches the search term you're looking for, the one that you put in the field, right? If it finds it, it's going to return the number, right? 0, 1, 2, 3. Otherwise, it's going to return a -1. Okay. Let's see here. So if the index is greater than or equal to 0, right? So the first one would be a 0, so greater than or equal to 0, 0, 1, 2 in our case, if we got 3 of them in there. So it is, then it's going to go ahead and do recipes index dot display. Okay, so it's going to go grab that recipe. All right, it's going to go grab that recipe at that index and then call that display method. All right, then what you're going to do is, remember on our GUI, we went ahead and had our stuff to, let's see, false, hide, add action. Oh, yeah. So you found it. If you find it, by default, it's going to be false, but we're just making sure here, and we're just going to set them all to false. Okay. So that when you come back to that screen, since we did find a match, we're not adding anything, right? And this is just displaying them all as false. Okay. So if you went in there the first time and added one, right, and then you tried to search again, if you didn't set these back, it was still displayed it. So you kind of got to set these back at a certain point in time. So this is setting them all to false, and that looks good. Okay, else. So if the index is not greater than or equal to 0, basically it's going to be that 1, -1, right? Because it didn't find that search term. So this is your setting this label to search term not found, add it below, and then you're setting all of these visible to true, right? So you're setting the labels and the text of the button all to true. And here you're just doing a clear on the add fields, okay? Before you send it back. All right. Pretty straightforward. And then if you go ahead and do an add and you click the add button, we're doing the same thing. We're just basically making sure it's null or in a white space, right? Setting these error messages or warnings, however you want to look at it. Check if the array is full. So if the recipe count is greater than or equal to the recipe.length, because we had a maximum of 15, then it's going to return, an error, a message, a warning that recipe book is full, maximum 15 recipes. Right? I think yours, in your case of the flashcards, it's 20. Then you're going to check if the recipe already exists. Right? Check if the recipe already exists. Find recipe. Okay, this recipe already exists. This is kind of just a double check. We're kind of already doing this by just following it in the first place, but it's just checking it again to see if it already exists, greater than or equal to 0. If the recipe already exists, okay. Then we're creating our new recipe, right? So our new recipe, right? This is the very name we're giving it. It's of type recipe, the recipe class, right? Create a new recipe object, and then we're grabbing the text for each one. We're grabbing the recipe name, the recipe ingredients, and the recipe instructions, and setting them all on there. So then we have a new object with a new recipe. Okay. And then and what we're doing here is setting it on the array. So we create this new object, but if we don't set that on that array, it's not going to be there, right? It's not going to be there the next time you come in because you didn't kind of save it anywhere, right? You created it. It's got to stay. It's got to be saved somewhere, right? It's got to reside somewhere. So basically, here you're getting your recipe count, right? Recipes and recipe count. So it's always, when you do the counts, right, we're always going to, it's always going to be one more. This recipe count's always going to be one more than we start at the 0, right? So this will always work. So here you're just doing the next one in line. So if this is the fourth one, it'll be it'll be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Will equal the new recipe, right? So then you've got a new one. And that's basically adding it to this, right? So you start out with the first 3, then you're adding the fourth one, right? Then right after that, down there below, we added one to our recipe count. All right. Let's see what else we have here. All right. And then we're just setting some error messages, basically saying that we added it successfully, and we're using our new recipe now and displaying that. that we just added, right? And then we're going to go ahead and hide all these things, all these things we added. We don't need those anymore. And we're just going to kind of hide all of those. And we'll clear out our text boxes as well. And put focus back in the recipe name. Okay, that's always a good thing to do as well. All right, I hope this helps. So you can kind of do something very similar with your flashcards. You can do it a little bit different. That's fine. Just kind of follow the UML diagrams. The important thing for your flashcard, make sure you create that class. But some of the things are going to be very similar, right? Storing storing your array, making sure that you have some kind of way to track the count, etc. And this is, definitely a handy way to go ahead and load your initial recipes, right? Okay. So let's go ahead and look at demo 2. So demo 2 is the contact manager. So the program can store up to 20 contacts. The program comes preloaded with 5 sample contacts. Each contact must have its own unique ID. Users can search for contacts by ID. Users can add new contacts. Program generates the next ID. Users can update the name, phone, and email of an existing contact. Users can delete a contact by ID and also creating an admin password at the top of the form for delete operations. Okay. All right. So in here we've got so basically the same thing as, obviously whenever you want to add a new class, come up here to go right click and do add class, right? Put in the name of your class, right? And then if you do it from here correctly, it's always going to be within the correct namespace, right? I'm just going to hit cancel since I already have this here. So basically contact, you got your private instance variables, right? ID, name, phone, email. You got your constructor to set all your variables from the beginning. We've got a read-only property for ID. Once an ID is created, right? Once an ID is created, we don't need a new ID. We don't need to update that, so it's only going to be a get only. But here we're doing read and write properties for name, email, name, phone, and email. So these are doing gets and sets. So this is kind of some way of a different thing. This is this values just a way that C# kind of, this is a more newer, more modern approach. Values basically just saying the value that you're setting, right? You're bringing in. So it's going to use this. Being whatever's passed in, so to speak, right? So this sets this. So these are doing getters and setters, right? Get and set for each one of these. The only one that's read only is this, right? So the only way to update, the only way to create and do an ID is through the constructor, right? Otherwise, all of these, name, phone, and email, can be updated after the fact, right? And then here's just a simple display, very similar to what we did before with the previous demo example. Looks like I didn't rename my form here. So here at the top, we have our contacts array, and we initialized it to 20. We have a contact count. We have an admin password and track currently displayed contact for updates. So our current contact index is a -1. Kind of the same thing here. We're loading our sample contacts. So we've got 5 different ones, right? 2, 5. So the 5th one. So we got 5 of them. So when we come back the next time to create a new one, it's going to start at 5, right? So we got 0 through 4, When we add another one, it will be using 5, and then obviously, this runs only one time, right? So that 5, this one will be set to 5 at that point, right? And then it's going to be keep on getting iterated every time we add a new contact. So kind of the same thing here. We're doing a search using the is null or white space, passing in the search ID, and basically please enter a contact ID if it's null or empty, right? And it's clearing fields and everything else. This will clear all the fields. Current contact index is -1 and return. So yeah, it's just resetting everything. Okay. So if it does have a value, this is good. It's going to just come down to this line, right? This, when you ever have a return, it's going to return out of here. You're never going to get here, right? If you don't have a valid value in here, if you don't have a real value in here, right? Then it's never going to get down to here because this return is going to just return out of this, and you're done, right? It's going to execute these lines, it's going to return, and you're done. So if there's a value in there, it's going to come down to this line, and you're going to trim this, and here you're just setting it all to uppercase, right? You could have done lowercase as well, but we're just setting them all to uppercase, right? Kind of like this, C001. All right. And then we're doing index find contact. So here we got to find contact. So we're passing in our search ID that we're getting out of our search ID text box, right? And we're looking for find contact. So let's go to that definition there. Kind of same thing we did before. This time we're doing uppers, okay, on our contact ID as opposed to lowercase for the other. Pretty much the same thing as before, right? Basically looping through all of our, based on how many contacts we have, right? Our contact count. We're looping through them all, and we're looking for this ID that we passed in, right? This is the ID we passed in from our text box, and these are all of the IDs of our array, right? These are all of these ones here that get set up here, right? And if it finds a match, we're going to return that index number. Otherwise, it's going to return -1. Okay. Here's just kind of these are kind of called a convenience method, or you just kind of, this one is just generate the next ID if needed. Okay, we're calling this here, later on here. So you're going to call get next ID, just automatically gets the next ID, right? All right. We have our button, add a click, and an update. We also have an update. And so let's just go ahead and run this. And we also have our delete. All right, let's just run this. So which was our contact numbers? I think it was 00. So this could be lowercase, so this should just find it by that, because it's going to switch them to upper, right? We do a search, there we find John Smith, right? If we want to change John Smith, we change John Smith to John Smith 2 there and do an update. And here it shows you the updated one. Shows that it was updated. Here's the name, John Smith 2. All right. Just make sure this all works. Looks good. So it's always holding. So once you update it, it's going to be holding on to that. So I don't want to say this is a bug, but this is kind of a feature that probably I probably shouldn't have been there. Let's see, contact 00 added successfully. Oh yeah, yeah, it added a new one. Okay. Let me see here. Search. So there's John Smith. It did update that one. It did update that one. If I change the name, right? So I can change this name and do update, and it will update C1 and all's good. But if I change the email address, right, and do update, unless I clicked the wrong button earlier. Oh no, I must have clicked the wrong button earlier. And then updated, all's good. I clicked an add contact by accident. Okay. So let's go ahead, and I think I created one by accident here. That was that one. So now I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Enter the password. What was the password? Up here, admin123. Now you don't have to have this on screen. That's a little pop-up. That's not necessary. You could just have a password on the screen as well, right? So you don't necessarily have to do it that way. And that deleted that successfully. So now if we search for C006, it should not be there anymore. If I do 5, that still should be there. Yeah. Okay. All right, let me look at that real quick. So this is kind of input box. You don't have to do this, okay? This is just an extra feature. If you'd like to do this, this is how you can do a little pop-up box like that to add that, all right? You can just go ahead and put a text box on your page if needed, okay? All right. I'm not going to go through every single line here, but you get the overall gist of how this works. Please let me know if you have any questions on this. I'm not going to go through every single one of these demos, but let's go ahead and go through the third one here. So the third one is a library card system. And so you got a library card class here. So here you've got a few of them are strings. You do have an int, right? So you have to account for one of them being an integer as opposed to the others being a string. And then I don't think I mentioned earlier, so these tell you that this is read-only. So if you see read-only, what that means is you're only going to have a get and you're not going to have a set, right? The only way to set any values is you have to call the library card constructor, right? To initially set everything. So once you do that, you cannot change the card number, you cannot change the PIN or the holder number, right? Now, what can be changed though is the books that are checked out, right? So that's going to be updated based on what you click. Okay. You've got a couple other methods on your object. You know, before we had the display here, right? But here we also have we got checkout book on our object, right? On our class, and we also have a return book method, right? Okay, let's look at that. So here's the basic screen. You got your card number, PIN, checkout book, return book, log out. Let me see the. Didn't change the name here, did I? All right. So lib 001, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, welcome back. And then you can basically check out a book. Book checked out successfully. Books checked out 3. Now 4, 5. Once you get past there, you have 5 books. Please return a book first. So you return a book. Now you can actually check out another one. Right? And you have your log out as well. All right. So let's look at that. It's a very similar kind of what we've done for other things, right? So some of this stuff, once you kind of maybe get some of the initial stuff done, it gets a lot easier, right? You're going to create, obviously, you have to create your class first, right? And here you got a card number, a PIN, the holder's name, which is the user, right? The card holder, and books checked out, which is integer, right? So you got an integer there as opposed to the others being the strings, right? And what's kind of a little different about this is you've got, for your library card, you're only passing in 3 fields. You're not passing in all 4. You're only passing in these 3, okay? This is going to be basically tracked and generated as we go along, okay? All right. So here, just like it said, you had certain ones that are the card holder's name, get only. You only can do a gets on those, right? Books checked out, right? Books checked out is can be changed, right? You can do a getter or a setter on those, okay? And then this books checked out, this is the one where you don't see it in the constructor, right? And then here's our other methods, right? Check out a book, you're gonna increment the underscore books checked out by 1, and a return book is gonna decrement it, right? It's gonna decrease, which is called decrement, right? Decremented by 1. All right, let's look at our code for this. So here we're setting the number to 10. We got a card count, very similar to what we've done before. Currently logged in card, active card. This is based on our login, right? By default, you're not logged in, so it's setting active card to null. Here it's doing a couple different things. This is basically your form constructor. It's always been like that, right? You always do initialize components. It's always there by default. And so you never want to mess with that. You always want it to be there. You don't want to put your things before that. You make sure if you're doing something, you want to put them after that, right? So here's loading your cards. So here's all your different cards. You got 5 different cards you're loading. Setting your card count, right? Then we have our login. Well, here, let's look at our buttons. Everything's always based on buttons, right? So here's our login button. Basically, if you didn't enter anything, you need to enter it. If you enter the data, you're going to call in the login. So if the active card is not equal to null, log out. So if you press login and you're already logged in, right, it's going to actually first log out any existing user. Because, well, it's basically what if you already got a user up and then you try to enter another user, you're still holding on to that previous one. So you're going to check your active card because your active card when you log in is going to be set. We set it down here below. So basically you're saying, hey, is this active? You don't want it to be active. If it is, you're going to call logout first, right? And let's go to that. So basically it sets your active card to null, right? You have been logged out. It's clearing your different things. And this is doing this update UI state. You don't necessarily have to do it like this, okay? So basically you're checking to see if the active card is not equal null, it's logged in, right? And it's just basically enabling and enabling it, right? Enabled equals not logged in, right? So it's going to be either true or false depending on what it is, right? So this is going to either set this to true or false depending on if it's already logged in or not logged in, right? All right. So back to the original search. So if you went ahead and put the data in there and searched, as long as it's not, first it's going to log out if there's an active card. So you're back to null, right? Then it's going to go ahead and search for that card. So you're looping basically through your card, right? Your card numbers for all your cards, right? Your cards is the variable that represent your array of library cards, correct? So it's doing two upper R, it's finding out if the card number that you entered matches the one. Basically, it's looping through all of them. If it finds a match, right, found card, check the pin. So you found your card. Now you're using that same array because there's a pin in that array, that same object array, right? So if you find the card number, then you need to check this pin in that same object, right? So you've already found which one had the card number. Now let's check the pin. So is that pin equals to this pin? If it is, log in successfully. Active card equals cards. Okay, now you've got an active card, and then you're displaying this text, right? Hold number, card number, and how many books you have checked out. This updates that UI state. You don't necessarily have to do all of that, okay? And then it's returning, right? So that's just the initial login. And then from there, you basically have so that was login. And then log out's just going to do the log out, which we kind of already looked at that real quick. The button checkout, so then you can go ahead and check out another book. Let's go look at that. So checkout, so if the active card equals null, right? Please log out first. It's telling you need to log out. If the active card.book checked out is greater than or equal to 5, right? So the active card is once you set your active card up here, it is the object that has been searched for and found, right? So you're setting the one found right here, which is of type library card, right? So this is the one you found that has all of the different things, right? That has the ID, the password, the name, right? It has all of that, right? It's holding on to all that for your active card, the one found. All right. And which one was I looking at? Checkout, right? So if it's equals null, yeah. So basically the reason that you're checking this is if you brought up the screen, it has a checkout. If you tried to click it and you're not logged in, first you have to have that active card, right? Once once you found that card, you set it on your active card. Now it's not null anymore. So then you're going to come down to this line, right? And you're going to do get books checked out. This is that instance variable. This is the one that we didn't pass um, as part of the constructor. This is just the one we are tracking as we go, right? Um, by default, it has 5, right? Or whatever. What was the number? Oh, different ones had different ones. Duh. Sorry. So yeah, books checked out for this user had 2, 0 for Jane Doe. Bob Wilson had 3. So this is just set as an example that this is how many they had checked out, right? So this they only can have. So like if you put in Charlie Davis and tried to add a book, no, you already got 5, right? Here you can add the other ones. You can add some more, right? So here, then you've got so basically if it's already greater than or equal to 5, you're going to have this, you're going to do return, you're going to leave this method, right? You're going to return from this method. Otherwise, you're going to set checked out book on that, right? On that active card. So we're going to go to the definition of that, checked out books. So all you're doing is incrementing that book count by 1, right? You're incrementing it by 1, and that's it, right? All right. And then the other button, right, calls the return method. So once again, it's always checking to make sure you've got an active card each time, that you actually one was found and it's now the active one. And so if that checked out is less than or equal to 0, right, you can't return books that aren't checked out. So first you're checking this, right? If this is 0, right, then no books to return, and it's going to just return out of there, right? If books checked out is 1 or greater, right, then you're going to go ahead and call this return book on the active card, right? And this return book it just does that decrement, right? So if we do this and go to the definition on that one, this is just decrementing it by 1, right? Okay. And don't worry about this update UI state, all right? You don't have to worry about that too much unless you want to. All right. So I think, once you got to start doing a couple of these, it'll get a little easier for you. Um, so I'm going to let you go through these other demos. And like I mentioned earlier, many of these are ones that you kind of already did, right? So you can copy that over to get started. Just copy over your form, your designer, your form, just to get that up and running. And then start adding your classes, right? You might have to add some other things as well, but at least you got a good base to get started. You shouldn't have to redo. There's, a couple of them where you're going to have to do, a little bit of significant UI changes, but, some of them you won't have to do much of anything. But, you will have to add your classes. You're just going to be doing things different, right? You're going to be holding on to that data a little bit differently. Before we just held on to string arrays of data. Now you're holding on to arrays of objects. Really, that's all that's really different for the most part. But, it takes a little time to get used to it and work through that. Okay. So I already have all of these sample ones, demo ones out there in the repository, which I've shared with you before. Same as other demo apps. I have those out, all of these out there, including this requirements document, if that helps you as well. So please let me know if you have any questions, have any concerns, or struggling with any of it, and I am more than willing to help you out. So that's all I have for today. Please let me know, and have a good one. Thanks.